Hello, everyone. Can you see the PowerPoint? Yes. Hey, Taylor. And Gabriel and Jayla. All right. We'll wait a few minutes for your classmates to chime in, and then I will proceed. Make sure you mute your mics if you're not speaking, so we don't have any of the background noise that will often be heard. Yes, Tim, what are you wearing? Or what?
No, so the Rio jacket is just straight orange, so it keys out really well with the green screen feature.
Oh, you got the green screen going. Okay,
So it's just a picture.
got it. Yeah, creativity when using Zoom, right? I'll just stick with a nice picture of campus.
Appropriate creativity.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so how's it going? Are you all tired of this whole remote learning, or is it okay thus far? I'll be honest, I'm really kind of tired of it, but
It's
better
been okay
safe.
so far.
Yeah,
It's
better
only been the
safe.
first week.
Yeah, yeah. It's only the first. Well, we only have 4 weeks at least, so we're counting down. So. All right, oops. So what I'm going to do today is briefly, we'll wait until a little bit after 3, and then I'll go over the assignment again. I'm going to do an example, and then I'll tell you what our little class level challenge is. This should be quite interesting. And I actually scaled it back quite a bit from what I was going to initially. Anyway, I won't start out with that. I guess I am a little early. Who else do we have on here? Urban, Tanira, Taylor, Tim, Brianna. And we'll wait a little bit more. It's not quite 3 yet, so. So once again, while we're waiting, basically, I'm going to use a Cadley primarily for participation. And as I said before, I'm really only going to have one lecture, and then I'll repeat it as far as the assignments. We only have 3 assignments remaining. This triggers one, which is not due until next week, and then the optimization, and then kind of I forget what the last one is, but so generally I'll have a lecture on Tuesday, and next week, because I'm just going to cover some aspects of the assignment and maybe answer some questions. I won't really have any new material for you. This is the whole transition period into this remote learning scenario. So we're going to try to make sure we all get through this without relatively unscathed as far as the education, and hopefully the experience will not be negative or anything like that. So, all right. So I have 12, that's a pretty good number. All right, and I'm recording the lecture, and as you saw, I'll post a recording in LoudCloud so you can review. All right, so let's get started. So my note, oh, let's close this. All right, so yes, we'll be done long before. We'll be done in 30 minutes or so. I'm not planning on keeping you long. I generally don't want to lecture more than 40 minutes. All right, so let's get started. So as you know, we have an assignment due next week on the 5th, and this is your triggers assignment. And basically you're going to alter and apply some trigger code. And I'm going to do an example today, which basically if you follow the example, you can get the assignment done right away, get it out of the way. So we're going to refer to that sym400 SYM400 triggers document that's in LoudCloud. Underneath the assignment, it has the instructions for the assignment and the template trigger code. And then basically you're going to edit that code, copy and paste it into your SQL Server Management Studio workbench, and then run it. Take screenshots of both the code and then the result. Basically, you do get a result from the trigger based on the aspects of what you're trying to accomplish in the trigger. So screenshots in a Word doc, you don't really need to provide any explanations for this assignment. It's pretty straightforward. And once I walk through it, I mean, you shouldn't really need, and I'll explain the code too, what's actually happening, but it's basically an exposure to what triggers do. And to be frank, you have triggers running all the time on your SQL Server within that database, and even within the VentureWorks database. So. All right, so essentially the purpose of this assignment is to alter and apply this trigger code to the person.person table. Basically, you're going to open up that document, take a look at the code, and we're going to take a look at it together right now. Alter it or modify the code, run it in your SQL Server, and then you'll see that it will return a result for you. And basically, you're triggering, this trigger is firing based on what you're performing on the person.person, or what you're doing to the person.person table. So, and these things will have to be in your assignment as far as these particular modifications of the table. So basically, once we create the trigger, you're going to go in and, please, when you run these updates, and these are just updates, make sure you screenshot both, you'll need to screenshot the query and then screenshot the result. Obviously, that'll be in one screenshot. So you're going to add a title to Ken Sanchez, Mr. You're going to add a middle name to Timothy, a middle name Timothy to Michael Rahim. You're going to add a title, Ms. And this is two things that you're changing on Heather Smith. Excuse me, not Heather Smith. It's you're actually adding the middle name Heather to Samantha H. Smith, and also adding the title Ms. And then finally, you're adding the title Mrs. and changing the last name of Lori K. Pinner to Thompson. So all of those particular aspects of the trigger, once the trigger is compiled successfully, you'll need to run them, screenshot them, etc., add them to your final doc for submission. Okay, so here's the trigger code. And I'm just going to go through this. Essentially, you create the trigger, and the TRG update columns is actually the trigger name. And then it's on, and it's for update. That means that this trigger will fire whenever there's an update to that table. and it's going to be the person, that person table. You add the clause set no count on, and that basically will eliminate the message that will produce that number of rows affected. Basically, you turn that off, so all it's going to return is the message that's produced by the trigger. That's why we're doing that. And then basically, we're declaring a couple of variables, and all this particular part of the trigger is making sure that we capture the right column and the right time from that update. And basically, with the information schema columns, that's just another system table that we're going to use to capture both the table, well, the schema of the table that's affected and the column name. So that's what that section is for. And it's basically using those variables in this executable section of the trigger. Remember, this is all in the trigger. And then we're using a counter. All this is just a looping counter that will go through and make sure that it'll return all of the columns that were affected by this trigger. And I'll show you an example once we go through this. And then the last part of the trigger is just producing the result table. And all this stuff, not the result table, producing the results from the table. And this will just, the whole purpose of this select statement in the trigger, it will produce a result that will show you the column that was affected, column or columns that were affected. And then, I remember I said column and column, single column and or multiple columns. And then the date that it was actually updated. So all of that's housed in this trigger. So any questions about that before I go on to our little example? Does that make sense to everyone? Of course, you're waiting for the example, so that it'll make more sense. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to practice using the same trigger code, the same premise. We're just going to impact the human resources.employee table. And I will show you, I don't have this in the listings, but I'll show you where you can change 2 columns and it'll display. So we could do something like change the CEO's marital status to married, and then maybe, well, we don't want to do that because that's a part of the, what else do we have in that table that we can change? We change his job title to supreme being or something like that, since he's the CEO. All right, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint, and I'm going to share my little SQL server or SSMS. All right. And I'm actually running this on well, let me make sure to log into my server first. This is on a VM, just in case you're interested. I'm actually running our session today from my Mac. So I'm running SQL Server on my Windows VM. So let me get that started here. All right. So now let me share that VM. Nope, not that one. Here we go. All right. Stop doing that. I need the Windows box, this one. All right, this is acting crazy. What do you guys see the Kali box? All right. Let's try this again.
I think it's just your Mac's desktop.
You just see the Mac. Well, you're just seeing the desktop, so I may not be able to share that's all right. Let's open up. Yeah, with the VMs, it's acting a little strange. I'm going to go ahead and open up my Windows box, join the meeting, and we will share from this box. Fun technology. All right, just give me a second to get this one started. Okay, I'm going to join the meeting in this box. And I'm going to stop the video over here. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. There, you see me twice now. Ooh, that's too much. All right. Y'all can still hear me, right?
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay, good. All right. So let me launch SQL Server here. All right. And go ahead and share my screen here. Oh, I can check. So y'all can see my little SSMS, right?
Yep.
Great. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take that code, that trigger code, and I'm going to copy it into our little workbench here. So I'm going to pull up the code from the lecture. I don't like typing, so I'm just simply copying in our trigger code, right? And all of the sections. We'll have to scroll through a little bit, and then the final select statement. All right. So this is just a trigger code right from the document, and I just explained exactly what that does. So there's a few things, just a couple things that you have to make sure that you edit before you try and run the. Okay, I'm gonna tab my Object Explorer. All right. So these square brackets, that's your schema. So basically, you just need to replace that with your schema. In this case, we're going to use human resources and remove the square brackets there. So our trigger name is human resources and trigger update column, right? And then these square brackets, this is our table. So we're going to use the human resources dot employee table, right? So now this trigger will be fired when an update happens to the human resources.employee table, right? Now, to make sure we return the information about what is actually happening to the table, in our loop here, basically you see that this select state, this declaration, we're setting this value in this select statement to the information that comes from this table, information schema table, and these columns, table schema and table name. So basically, if we're impacting the human resources employee table, this is the information that we need to add to these blank, the blank parts of our where clause. All I'm doing is just copying the schema and the table name, right? Does that make sense? So this, we're going to pull that information from, or we're going to set it in that table and then pull it from the table with the select statement here. So then we do the same thing. We just copy that schema or type it in. So now our trigger is ready to go. We added our schema, and basically we had our trigger name. We made sure the table, now this is the table that we're impacting now, human resources.employee, and then we made sure that within the trigger, all of that information is consistent. So we can execute this. And when you execute that, it should give you, without error, that the command is completed successfully, which means that this trigger is built. So if you go to your Object Explorer and take a look at that table, resources.employee table, there's a triggers folder, and you see that there's our trigger here. It is now in that table. Okay. So how do you test? Let me ask you all this. How do you test to see if that trigger will fire? What do you have to do? What did I state we needed to do? We're going to change the CEO's. We're going to change his title to Mr. and change his marital status to M, to married. Right? Let me check the chat. Yeah, I should do this more often. Two systems. Update, yes. This is an update trigger. Whenever we update any information in this table, this trigger should fire. So let's check it. So I'm going to open up a new query, and I'm just going to run a simple update. You know, we all remember how to do that, right? And we want to update the human resources employee table, right? We're going to set, let's see, marital status equal to M. Right? Well, let's see. Values. And we're going to, so let me ask you this. How do you, instead of me writing this, how do you update multiple columns in an update query? What do I need to do?
Is it comma?
Comma, you saw that. Now what?
Would you put the column name?
With the column name? Just a comma and then the column name. So let's say job title.
Or do you need and?
So is it a comma or and? Someone says and. Okay, let's try and. Well, let's just change this job title then. Doesn't look like it likes that and. Is that right?
I'm gonna say no.
I'm going to say no also. So that's not right. So now, do we just put a comma then? Doesn't seem like it produces any error messages, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll stick with that. So remember, whenever you run an update statement, you have to have a where clause, or else you'll update everyone's information, which is not good. So you're going to set marital status equal to M and job title equal to supreme being, where what? Where what?
Or name.
Name? Yeah. How about business entity ID? We know that the CEO's business entity ID is what?
1.
1, right? Okay. So we're going to go ahead and run this. And voila, see what happened? This shows you that the trigger fired because what returned after we ran this update query, because generally you would only see so many columns affected, right? But we turned that off with the, if you remember, we did this set no count on, which means it's not going to return that. And now we see that we know that the updated columns are job title and marital status and was updated on this date at this time, etc. And just to check, if we go into our table, so we're just going to check and select job title and marital status. From, whoops, yeah, stop that. From human resources, employee. Where business entity ID is equal to. So if we run that, you see that our CEO is now supreme being and he's now married. Do y'all see that? Makes sense? So if we go back to the trigger here, and you're basically going to do the same thing. And yes, when you submit your assignment, I do want you, obviously, to run your update. And you can actually run this again. It's just an update. So I do want to see this when you run your query. And you don't have to necessarily run a select statement. That's just a verification. But I should see a date modified, and it should be, you know, an accurate date like this year, unless you know. So I'm going to check that as well. So does that make sense? Any questions about that? That is a trigger. That is the trigger exercise. And I do obviously want you to take a screenshot of the trigger. Once the trigger is completely compiled, then go ahead and take a screenshot of your Object Explorer as normal. So I should see this particular picture, but obviously it's going to be a different table, right? All right, any questions? Does everyone understand how the trigger exercises, the trigger assignment is going to work? Now, making the changes is pretty easy, but I need to make sure that you all are aware of what the requirements once you submit it. And yeah, it's just going to kick me out, but let's see, we have 10 minutes. I have plenty of time. All right, so y'all can handle that, right? That's not going to be a big problem for you to complete that assignment. remember, I need all of those aspects. The trigger, commands completed successfully, et cetera, and then the actual update statements. You have several of them, and then the result table. All right,
Yeah, I have a question, Professor.
go ahead.
Okay, so I'm looking at the assignment and we're only using the person table, correct?
That is correct.
And then the update is where we like add the title, middle name, and stuff like that, correct?
Where, yes, where it's instructing you to change data in that table. Yes.
Okay, and then you want us to actually, like when we're done with the update, you want us to do the select and then have all those listed?
No, if everything runs correctly and you receive a screen that looks like this one here,
Uh-huh.
that's fine.
Oh, okay, got it.
That tells me that the update ran successfully.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right. So let me stop sharing my SQL there. And go back quickly to my Mac. Share my PowerPoint. If it'll work. Where is it? Uh, Well, I'll just have to bring it up over here. Yeah. 326, right? Where is it? Down in there. All right, give me a second. Okay, I know this is what you're waiting for. What is the bonus? What is the challenge? All right. Let me do a quick scan. Okay. All right. Okay, can you see the PowerPoint again? Right? We'll do all that.
Yes.
All right, so the challenge is this. So if you want to take on the challenge, and there's a reason why I'm doing this, because if you're taking 408, which most of you, IT cyber or IT, I'm challenging you to install Visual Studio 2019, and you do have it available on Azure for education. Download and install it. Those of you that are using a Mac, Visual Studio will actually run, there's versions for Mac. So you can do that if you want. And basically, you're going to create a SQL Server database project, connect to your server, and then run one of your stored procedures that you've created. You've created a few of them, either in practice or the one that you created in the assignment. So the reason why, and once again, the reason why I'm presenting this challenge, it's good to essentially understand, that you can use a tool like Visual Studio to do just about anything. And some of your database knowledge, especially if you're doing analytics, you may run into a Visual Studio installation where you're building an application, et cetera, and you need to understand the SQL part of it and all that. So let me see if I can, well, no, it's on my server on that. So basically, and I will make sure I can try and show you this next time. But Visual Studio is just another Microsoft project, and it does have a development side of it that will connect to SQL Server. So that's the challenge. It's a interesting one, but it's not really that difficult. But so there you go. Any questions about that? And as I said, I will post the lecture and the video to make sure. Any
So
questions?
are we downloading the Visual Studio Enterprise?
Yes,
Okay.
it is available. It's the only version available in Azure. And normally, yeah. Any other questions? Let's see. And I will give you the entire weekend to do that. So this is due by Sunday. Sunday the 29th at midnight if you're going to take on the challenge. The triggers assignment is not due until the 5th. And basically you want to send it to a private, to a private forum in LoudCloud. And just make sure you just label it a SQL challenge. Yes, yes, as many screenshots, the installation process, the basically how you're connecting to the server, which is key, and then the screenshot of the query environment, and then the screenshot of the procedure ran. All of that has to be a part of it. So it is quite extensive, but it's not impossible. Other questions? And you're all good with the trigger assignment. As I said, that's really pretty easy. Just make sure you satisfy all of the requirements in the trigger. All of these updates should be screenshot along with the trigger that it fires. All right. Okay. Well, that's basically all I have. No, you can choose. You can choose any stored procedure that you have now, or even one that you can create you can create one yourself. And in case you're interested in my background, that's me in the bottom, I guess the bottom in the middle there on the right, when I was 17 or 16 or 17. So it's quite old. Yeah, that's my National Honor Society picture. Carl Hayden High School, right here in Phoenix, not too far away from GCU.
Look like hippies.
Yeah. All right. So if you have any issues or concerns, because we'll probably get kicked out, just let me know. Remember to log into LoudCloud periodically because the powers that be are checking. And yes, make sure, I think all of you are fine. I don't think I had any issues with individuals that haven't shown up or haven't contacted me. So thank you and have a good weekend. I will see you all on Tuesday. I'll just do another quick review next week. But this part of our journey will be pretty simple. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Take care. Stay
Have a
safe.
good day.
Bye all.
Oh,
Bye.
hold on.